Okay, let's start. Good morning. We have Ambassador Dmitry Polyansky as a speaker today. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Theodore. Is it working? Yeah. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for coming so early to the United Nations. I think it's earlier than you usually do it every day. I assume so. We decided still to hold a press conference, though it was a little bit of a short notice. Usually we announce our plans 1 week ahead or so. But we thought that it was really very important for us to maintain the tradition of meeting you at ambassadorial level once a month. So we want to be very transparent. Haven't received any questions during this period, which exceeded a little bit 24 hours. But I assume that you have some. I also see that some people are joining us online. Yes, Theodore, as far as I understand. Well, I will say several introductory remarks, maybe, and then you will have absolute freedom to ask your questions. This was a difficult month for diplomacy, for us. Situation in many regions of the world were very preoccupying, including Europe, including our immediate neighborhood. You know that I have kind of a tradition to pick the quote of the month and the tweet of the month. I tried to do it as well. They illustrate what trends there are in the world and what challenges do we face. So, as tweet of the month, I would pick a tweet from my Ukrainian colleague, counterpart, Mr. Kuleba, Minister for Foreign Affairs, of the 22nd of November. We see a surge in Russian disinformation, including false accusations of Ukraine plotting a military attack in the Donbas. Let me state it officially, Ukraine does not plan a military offensive in the Donbas. We are devoted to seeking political and diplomatic solutions to the conflict. Very nice tweet, I like it, really, especially about Ukraine devoted to seeking political and diplomatic solutions. And then the continuation. Ukraine keeps working hard to revive the Normandy format with Germany and France as mediators. We call on Russia to engage constructively in these peace efforts instead of undermining them. Well, to comment on Ukraine peaceful intentions, I picked up today's tweet by a freelance photographer and correspondent from the UK, Dean O'Brien. I know that somebody had the opportunity to meet him during one of our events. So he says that the tweet was posted 4 hours ago. Ukrainian forces using mortars opened fire on an apartment building in the village of Nikolaevka, Lugansk People's Republic. As a result, a residential apartment building was significantly damaged. He gives the exact address of the site, and there are tweets like this every day from him. He is there and his friends are there witnessing the situation on the ground, so it illustrates the peaceful intentions of Ukraine. And one more illustration of peaceful intention of Ukraine came 2 days ago when somebody who is claiming to be your colleague, journalist, Mr. Yuri Butusov, filmed himself shooting a 152 millimeter howitzer at the positions of the Donbas fighters. Some of you might know that this kind of weapons is prohibited by Minsk agreements by itself. So a person openly posing for social media, firing a mortar to the position of Lugansk fighters and damaging residential buildings and claiming to be a journalist. I think this is the best illustration of how the situation is being perceived in Ukraine and what kind of thoughts are there. I hope that you don't fire mortars in your free time. I really appeal to you to use pens, which might be pens and words sometimes are harder and more dangerous weapons than mortars. And also to give you another statement of the day, and then I will comment it a little bit. I picked it today. Just a minute. So it's about Poland Prime Minister urges NATO to wake up to destabilization by Russia and allies. So Mr. Mateusz Morawiecki thinks that NATO should connect the dots and wake up to Russian attempts to destabilize the region. He cited a buildup of Russian forces near Ukraine, soaring gas prices, and the crisis on Poland's border with Belarus. So it's all very illustrative of what was happening this month, because we saw a real surge in warmongering activities and accusations of Russia making a build-up on the border with Ukraine, being offensive, being provocative, triggering energy crisis, though we explained in detail how energy prices are formed. Working together with Belarus to promote the migrant crisis. All these accusations were part of the agenda of our Western colleagues. I assume that the statement of Mr. Morawiecki that I cited was made especially on the eve of the two-day summit of NATO defense ministers, which, as I learned, is about to start in Riga, and it's quite understandable because there is a number of countries, some of them are very close neighbors of ours, for whom Russian threat, alleged destabilizing activity of Russia is kind of a raison d'être. So otherwise there would be absolutely no justification for what they do, for what they declare, for what they say. And this trend is very clear this month. So I think almost every Western politician commented on alleged Russian buildup on the border with Ukraine. Some of them cited very remote regions far from Ukrainian border, assuming that Russia has no right to maneuver and to deploy its forces on its territory. Nobody paid attention to very provocative maneuvering that is taking place now in the Black Sea with the American ships coming there to the Black Sea. And Black Sea, as you know, is quite far from United States. It's not the Gulf of Mexico, it's much further. So a lot of these things formed the agenda for this month. I also cited some Ukrainian news because there was also one very remarkable event. We published, the Foreign Ministry of Russia published the exchange of letters between Russian Foreign Minister Mr. Lavrov and his counterparts from Germany and France. We did it specifically. It's quite an unusual move, and we warned in advance our colleagues. We did it specifically because it was otherwise impossible to answer all these allegations that we heard that Russia is not interested in holding a Normandy format meeting at the level of foreign ministers. So if you have the time to analyze these documents, you will see that Russia was not only in favor, but Russia was proposing concrete things to be discussed and to be agreed upon in this meeting. We had some problems with the date proposed, the 11th of November, but it happens in diplomatic life when we have to look for alternative date, and it's not a big problem. We were very much sad about the fact that our French and German colleagues, with this event and on the eve of this Normandy summit meeting, absolutely showed themselves as a biased party in these deliberations, because for those who read Minsk agreements, for those who are familiar with the situation, it's absolutely clear that the core of the Minsk agreement is the direct dialogue between Ukraine and the authorities of Donetsk and Lugansk. If you deny it, if you claim that Russia is part of Minsk agreement, if you say that Russia has not fulfilled or implemented some of its obligations under Minsk agreement, then you absolutely distort the essence of these agreements, and this is very dangerous. And unfortunately, we see our Western partners, and in particular France and Germany, to follow more and more this devastating path, which can lead us to some very dangerous developments, given the facts that Ukraine is citing every day alleged reports on Russian military activity, on our plans to attack Donbass, and so on and so far, other things like this. And as I quoted to you, the real shelling, the real damage is being produced by Ukrainian forces on a daily basis. Well, I think I stop here. There were some highlights of the month, like refugee crisis and other things. But I'm sure you might raise it in your questions if you have, if you want to receive additional information from me.
Ambassador, thank you. In the name of UK Association, thank you for this briefing, and definitely we need at least one per month. Philippe Rater from AFP. My question is this one. You have a draft resolution on climate change and security on your table. A vote is expected this week. It would be the first one if it's adopted. What is your position of this draft, on this draft? Thank you.
I think that you're better informed than myself, because I was not aware of the fact that the voting will take place this week. It is a fixed date. It is expected. I'm sorry. So I didn't expect it to happen this week. Let's put it this way. But thank you for the tip. Yes, we know that there is a desire of some of our colleagues to promote some kind of a draft resolution on climate change. If you take some effort, you will find my statement in Security Council. I think it happened during the high-level week, when there was a high-level event on the climate. So I had to define our climate policy and whether it is linked to the Security Council in our understanding. Our logic is very simple. Well, Security Council is a specific instrument. It's not like a knife of a surgeon. It's rather like an axe. So if you use the axe, you should really understand that the consequences of using an axe can be a little bit unpredicted. And there are a lot of situations that happen in the world, in the United Nations, that are not being reflected in the Security Council. UN is much bigger than Security Council, and there are other bodies and forums that are doing very important things. And the fact that these these processes are not discussed in the Security Council does not make them less important for everybody. So, in other words, importance or not importance of some resolution or topic shouldn't be judged by the fact whether it is discussed or not discussed in Security Council. And climate change is really a clear example of this situation. Of course, it's important. Of course, it affects everybody. And you saw recently the engagement of all the countries at the Glasgow conference, and the outcome of the Glasgow conference might be disappointing for some, encouraging for the others, but still it reflects the preoccupation of the international community of what's happening. It also contains a certain plan of action. But what is important about this conference is that it unites parties from all over the world. It's conclusive. It's inclusive. So all the countries participate, all the countries send delegations, there are NGOs. And that's how the climate change, we think, should be tackled. It should be tackled by each and every member of the United Nations, each and every nation of the world. If we try to limit it to the Security Council, which, with all due respect, has only 15 members, this will not be an inclusive dialogue. It will be a little bit distorted. It will be kind of fit artificially into the standards and methods of work of Security Council. And it's very difficult to take a resolution imposing something on somebody, as some countries might want, because there is still no basis for such thing. And the problem of climate change is still being discussed, and there are different views on it, and we haven't yet come to the stage when we really can take common and very bold decisions that some people expect from us. I mean, when I say us, I mean the humanity as a whole, not the members of the Security Council. So bringing climate topic to the Security Council and trying to affect, to enact such mechanism as Chapter 7 of the Security Council, for example, might be very dangerous, and instead of helping to fight climate change, it might trigger more divisions, more controversies in efforts to combat climate change. And we understand that some of our colleagues want to raise this topic to show that Security Council is engaged, that Security Council is aware. But of course we are engaged, of course we are aware. Apart from being members of the Security Council, we are members of the United Nations, and we all, in our capacity as countries, participate in all these things. So that's why we don't think that there will be any value added from such initiatives. We still have dialogue with the pen holders, with the countries who are behind this. We hope that we will be able to convince them that this initiative is very harmful and not timely. So we still have time. It is assumed, as you say, that there will be a voting this week, but it's not yet predefined. And I think that, as far as I know, our experts are still in contact, and they continue negotiations this very minute.
James.
James Bays, Al Jazeera. My question concerns the GA and specifically the Credentials Committee of the General Assembly, which meets on the 1st of December in just a few days' time. Russia is a member of that committee. So in your national position, Russia's position going into this very important Credentials Committee meeting, does Russia believe representation needs to change to those that are actually in power in Naypyidaw and Kabul?
It's a very philosophical question, I would say. It's very difficult to answer yes or no in this regard. Russia, of course, prefers to interact with those who represent their countries, who represent their governments. So we were very clear about it, speaking about Myanmar, for example. Taliban is a little bit different story. We are engaged, everybody is engaged, but you know that there is still no recognition and no recognition inside. But let's look at this situation from the point of view of ambassadors that are in question. So whom do they represent when they sit in the GA hall, when they vote? When Myanmar, for example, changed its position on certain resolutions which we were promoting, and traditionally Myanmar supported these resolutions, we were not sad. We just understood that this is very political, and this doesn't represent the position of Myanmar as a country. And of course, it's quite deplorable on the one hand. On the other hand, it of course diminishes the significance of work of this or that delegation in the United Nations. Everybody understands this. On the one hand, on the other hand, they are still our colleagues. We do not run from them. We do not avoid handshaking. We understand that from the point of view from the personal point of view, this is a very tragic situation, and we don't want to over-exaggerate it. I'm sure that the Credential Committee will find a way forward. As you know, that this body is a very specific one, and it proposes some kind of solution, but it still should be agreed by the General Assembly. So it's only a basis for General Assembly decision. They will have deliberations. We are not the only member of the Credentials Committee. I do not want to rush and to be a spoiler in these discussions. Of course, I know certain things, certain approaches, but we will be able to speak about them only once the meeting has taken place. Okay.
Edie?
The first row, I think, is...
Yeah.
Okay. First come, first served.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. There have been a couple of major hotspots in the world today.
Couple, to put it mildly, yeah.
To put it mildly, right. So I wondered if you could give us, I'll pick 3. Starting out, Ethiopia. Is Russia concerned that the country could end up dividing, basically falling apart? Is there anything you think that the Security Council could do? Is Russia involved? Secondly, since we're in that region, Sudan, another hotspot, problems between the military-controlled government, the prime minister coming back, protesters not happy. What, if anything, can the Security Council do? And I guess I could ask the third thing on Somalia, since we're staying in the region.
You're very much focused on the region, since you suggest we're staying in this region, but of course there are more disturbing situations elsewhere. But if you insist, I will briefly comment on these 3. So they're quite different, by the way. If you speak about Somalia, it's really a chronic crisis, unfortunately. So this country is trying to get together and to be reborn as an integral country. We all recognize Somalia, but we also understand that there are incredible challenges ahead for this country. We try to support the authorities of this country in their efforts. We try to be engaged in formulating the best possible peacekeeping formula for the UN to continue, and we rely very much on the expertise of our colleagues from the African Union. This is our principle, as you know, African problems to African solutions. I think that AU is very deeply involved in this situation. We also are very much worried by the terrorist activity, which never ceases in this country. A lot of terrorist groups are very active and very much in control of certain regions of this country. But I don't think that the international community is split on Somalia. We more or less see it through the same optics. I also think that we again more or less see through the main optics the situation in Ethiopia, which is quite recent and which is really extremely worrying. Ethiopia is a big country, very populous. It's very strategic from many points of view. It used to be an exemplary, I would say, situation for a lot of neighbors, and the best reflection of this was Nobel Prize to Mr. Abiy Ahmed, who is now being criticized by our Western colleagues. It's a very complex situation. It has a lot of layers, a lot of ethnic layers. It's not very simple. These guys are good and the others are bad. When the crisis started, we always said, and we continue to say right now, that the first thing is ceasefire, then it's negotiations. That's the universal formula for solving any problem, any conflict, and it is applicable to almost all the conflicts in the world. And at some point of time, still there are negotiations. Unfortunately, in many parts of the world, some protagonists believe that they should have an upper hand first, and then they would have a better negotiating solutions. But they still understand that they will have to conduct negotiations most likely. So the situation in Ethiopia is very dynamic. It's very contradictory. There are very conflicting reports. Some people say that Addis Ababa is being surrounded. The others would say that the TPLF is being pushed away from Addis, and Mr. Ahmed is there at the ground commanding their troops, commanding Ethiopian troops. It's very difficult to get the clear picture of what's happening. We warned from the very beginning, our Western colleagues, that they shouldn't interfere into this conflict, that they shouldn't try to do something in non-transparent way, be it with the Tigrayan rebels or with the Ethiopian government, that everything should be very much transparent. Unfortunately, there were situations when at least our Ethiopian friends claimed that there was direct involvement of international powers, of foreign actors in the conflict. I can't say is it justifiable or not. We rely upon their information, but I know that this is very sensitive for them. There was a number of expulsions. There was a number of people being declared persona non grata. Ethiopians say that they conducted some malicious activities against their country, and they provide certain proofs. Other parties claim that it's not the case. Again, it's very difficult to make a judgment. So as far as Security Council is concerned, of course, we need to keep the situation on the radar, in the focus of our activities, which we do. We regularly discuss Ethiopia. We regularly call and we regularly make efforts to provide the population which is suffering with humanitarian aid, and this remains the focus of Security Council activities. We try to find this balance, this point where the parties should engage or will be willing to engage in negotiating solutions, and that's the most favorable options, to sit down and to put aside the arms and to start negotiating. However, the situation on the ground seems to be not very much favorable for such a scenario so far. But we continue our efforts multilaterally, bilaterally as well. We think that Ethiopians are wise people and they will sort out their differences, hopefully sooner than later. Same applies to Sudan. I mean, the fact that they are very wise people. This is a country with very, very ancient history. It faced a lot of difficult situations. It's not in the easiest situation right now. As you know, when the military retook, I would say, power several weeks ago, there was an outcry from our Western colleagues who claimed that this is a military coup, and we were discussing with you in the stakeout whether it's a coup or not a coup. And it turned out that we were right, that the military component of the power, which took more, I would say, functions because of the very dire economic situation, because of the protests in this country, still managed to re-engage with the Prime Minister. They achieved a certain agreement which is not very much praised by some of our partners, by some of NGOs, but still this is an EU arrangement which seems to be favored by the majority of Sudanians, and we hope that this country will continue to implement this agreement. So transition is still on the table. Transition is happening. They modified a little bit the parameters, but they didn't do it out of the blue. They did it because the situation was very dire and the country faced enormous economic problems. There were protests, there were demonstrations because of inefficient policies, as some part of population thought, and so drastic actions were in sight to solve this situation. So we are more confident about what's happening in Sudan, and I see that our Western colleagues, well, I wouldn't say that they were happy about this arrangement, but I haven't heard recently any sharp criticism of this arrangement. I think it's a wait-and-see policy. We all want to see what will come out of it. If they find certain point of balance in the arrangement between military and civilian authorities, and if they will be able to move forward smoothly along this path, then I think that this is a kind of scenario that we all should wholeheartedly support.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Susan Tehrani from WION News, India. President Putin is expected to visit India and meet with Prime Minister Modi. What kind of partnership is Russia looking to establish with India, considering India's proximity to the United States? Thank you.
Well, I wouldn't say that India is characterized by kind of proximity to the United States, and I don't think even Indians would say that you are right, because they always tell us, and we believe them, that they want to be, I would say, independent and not relying on this or that superpower. So they want to have the freedom of maneuvering, which we respect. India is an extremely important country. Everybody wants to have relations with it. You said that we want to establish a partnership. That's not true, because we already have a partnership. We want to reinforce this partnership, of course. So our relations date back to the early years of Indian independence, and we were always supportive of this country, and we still have a lot of friends there. A lot of Indians speak Russian. Indian movies are very popular among young Russians, and they know the stars of Bollywood. So this is kind of very, very intimate proximity at the level of people-to-people contacts. At the political level, well, I wouldn't overestimate the picture that some try to portray as India drifting away from contacts with Russia. Well, India is participating in certain US-led initiatives which are very questionable to us, like Quad, for example. But at the same time, India is always saying that they don't want to participate in anywhere which is anti-China, I would say. So at the same time, India is a member of BRICS, which is a very important group for the whole world, and which exists for many years already, which has proven its usefulness and its influence in the world. In the BRICS, India interacts with China, with Russia, with Brazil and South Africa, and we think that this cooperation deserves reinforcement. So we view the importance of both bilateral relations with India and multilateral relations with India. We listen to the explanation of our Indian partners. We don't see, frankly, a lot of things to worry about. India is a big country. It has to have diverse foreign policy, and nobody expects India to align with this or that pole, I would say. So we are engaged in very intensive dialogue, which we value very much, and I know that our Indian partners are also of high opinion of this dialogue. We have regular consultations, and we are very eager to continue like this. I think the whole world will benefit from this. Okay?
Okay, the last one from here, then we'll go on the...
Thank you. Ray Bouchafra from Sky News Arabia. Many Arabic countries have showed interest to help the reconstruction of Syria after normalizing their relationship with this country. My question is, how will be the Russian presence in this country in the future, since the war is almost over and terrorism is defeated? My other question is, last Saturday, 2 protesters in Niger, they were killed and 17 injured in clash with the French military convoy. We know that France is your colleague in Security Council as permanent member and very active in the peacekeeping operations in Africa. You have any comment on that? We didn't hear any official comment about this incident.
I'll start from your second question. Frankly speaking, it's the first time I hear about it, and it looks very sad news, preoccupying, but I don't know the details. It's very difficult to comment what has happened. The whole Sahel region is very non-stable, I would say, so a lot of things happening there. Countries have different positions, and I know that there are protests in different places, not only in Niger, but I haven't heard about this particular one. As for Russia and Syria, well, we hope that the situation will change for the better quite soon. We see that the Syrian government restores control of the bigger part of its territory. There are certain enclaves, there are certain regions which are still not under Syrian control, but the trend is very positive, and it's very much different from the time when I, for example, arrived in New York. I remember we were discussing situations when terrorists were on the outskirts of Damascus and were shelling the capital, and we had enormous divisions with our Western partners who tried to portray the forces that they supported and they, to some extent, continue to support right now as opposition, which was a very difficult exercise and absolutely not convincing. Now I think our cooperation on Syria has taken different forms, and you know that we adopted resolution on to extend for half a year the cross-border mechanism with unanimity, which is really a very, very rare case. We are engaged on this issue bilaterally with American partners. We have certain understanding on this with European partners. The resolution that I mentioned, 2585, if I'm not mistaken, is also about early recovery projects. It's about increasing cross-line deliveries of humanitarian aid. And I know that there are efforts, ongoing efforts now from the part of the UN, especially to live up to the expectations that are defined by this resolution. We expect the report of Secretary General, which will have a decisive character for the future of cross-border mechanism. There are some optimistic developments. I wouldn't say that the whole picture is rosy, but it's much less black than it used to be several months ago. So, of course, Russia, being a friend of Syria, is planning to assist, to be there as a friend, to be invited there. If we are not invited, if we are not wanted, well, we will not impose ourselves, of course, on any country, including Syria. But I know that Syrian government also values very much cooperation with Russia, and that keeps us in this country, still keeps us there. And I am absolutely sure that at some point of time, better sooner than later, we will come to more economic agenda on Syria, more economic cooperation, the rebuilding of the country. I'm absolutely sure that we will see quite soon the turning point in the situation with the refugees, with people living outside Syria, and I know that a lot of them express their desire to come back. This is a complicated process. It's not being done by just magic wand and they return. It implies a lot of things that should be done, but I know that Syrian authorities are very eager to do these things, and that there are already now quite good conditions for people to return, and people are returning, not maybe in the quantities that some would wish, but in some considerable quantities. So I hope that this process will continue, and we will see quite soon restoration of Syria, restoration of its position in the world, of its position in the Arabic world, in Arab League, which is also very important. I'm very much encouraged by the fact that a lot of Arabic neighbors of Syria also start to re-engage with this country. This is indispensable, and we would very much welcome and support this process.
Okay, let's take some questions online. Pamela Falk, please.
Don't forget about Russian correspondents.
We won't.
They might be offended.
Thank you. All right, pre-Russia correspondent Pamela Falk from CBS. Thank you, Frieder, and thank you for the briefing. My question first is about Iran and the negotiations that are going on right now. I don't know if the last time you demurred because it's coming out of Vienna, but can you tell us the Russia position on it, on the latest demands of Iran, And if you don't want to talk about that, or even if you do, could you tell us if there's any lifeblood in the Middle East Quartet, since a Security Council meeting is coming up shortly? Thank you.
There's definitely lifeblood in Middle Eastern Quartet. I can tell you because we invested heavily in it, and my colleague and my friend Vladimir Safrankov is now a part of this team, a very efficient diplomat. We all respect him and know him. And I know that they are meeting. They are meeting even in person. There was recently a meeting in Oslo, the first in recent years, I would say, in-person meeting. So the Quartet is the only mechanism which really can bring the Middle East peace settlement, peace process back on track. And I will speak about it in several minutes when we will have open debate or briefing on Middle East. So we think that.
Just on that,
yeah.
Can you say are there meetings? Are there ongoing meetings? There was one a few weeks ago.
In the Quartet.
Of the Quartet.
Well, there are ongoing
Yes.
there are ongoing contacts, and I know that they are meeting quite regularly. The representatives in the Quartet. Meeting online, either bilaterally or multilaterally. I think it's once every 2 weeks. I may be mistaken, but the frequency is like this, that they really touch base on what's happening and try to define the way forward. So I can't say that the Quartet is inactive. It is active. It is working. We hope that at some point of time we will also come to ministerial meeting of the Quartet. We had such proposal, and we feel that this is something that is overdue, but not everyone from our partners is ready for such a move right now. But we don't see any alternative for the fair solution of Middle East problem without the enactment, without bigger role of the Quartet of international intermediaries. If I may, on Iran, well, it's happening live. It's happening live in Vienna, and of course I would be very cautious to comment, and I will not conceal the fact that I don't have the last-minute information. I read that they re-engaged. I mean, the JCPOA members. There was no direct contact between Iran and United States. But I don't think it was expected at this stage. The most important thing is to re-engage and to understand where we are. We hope that we are not very far from the restoration of the normal functioning of the JCPOA. I would like to remind you in this context that the whole issue right now, it was triggered by the United States withdrawal by the previous administration from JCPOA, and that's when the whole situation got off hand. And what we are trying to do now is we are trying first and foremost to re-engage the United States there. Of course, there are things that Iran has done, and a lot of people criticize this country, saying that it has deviated from its commitments. But none of the steps that Iran has done is irreversible, and everything can be reversed. Iran is saying that it is ready to re-engage, but of course it has certain quite understandable demands vis-a-vis the United States. And again, I need to reiterate that we need to have non-distorted picture of what has happened. So it's mostly about U.S. re-engagement with the JCPOA that we are speaking about in Vienna.
Benny, online, please. Benny Avni.
Question, follow up on Pamela's question. Iran saying specifically that it would talk only about removal of sanctions rather than about the situation where it is now as far as enrichment, as far as the type of centrifuges, as far as inspection and so on. Does Russia support that? And the second question, there's quite a lot of rumbling in the U.S. Congress on Nord Stream 2. Is Russia worried about it?
There's a lot of rumbling in the U.S. Congress about everywhere. So if we worry about everything that's going on at the Congress, we would lose our nerve, you know. So we don't want such a scenario. That's why I don't think we need to be over-exaggerating of what has happening. Well, we have been facing sanctions for almost everything, for being Russia. So I don't know, another set of sanctions, another thing. Should it worry us very much? I don't know. The people in the Congress, they really...
But isn't...
Yeah. Sorry?
Sorry, but is Nord Stream 2 a done deal in your view, or is it...
In our understanding, you mean
is there any problem?
You mean Nord Stream? It is something that is between Russia and Germany. So I don't know how U.S. Congress is involved in it. It's very difficult for me to see a link. They can ramble about anything they want. You know our attitude towards these exterritorial sanctions, of how illegal they are, and not only we are kind of not understanding how they are being imposed. And of course, this is the most this is very illegal thing, and this is something absolutely contrary to the international law. But well, United States doesn't always take any care about international law, as you know. So again, let them ramble, no problem. As for Iran, the picture that you portray is a little bit simplified. I would say this is more nuanced than this. So of course, Iran is worried about the unjustified sanctions that the United States has imposed on this country after it withdrew from JCPOA. We all remember what the fuss was about it a year ago when there was all this ballet about snapback or no snapback, and everybody was trying to understand the rationale of the Trump administration. Now the Biden administration says, yes, we are ready to be back, but so Iranians are also saying, yes, we are also ready to reverse what we have done, but, and so our task as diplomats is really to make these two buts meet, and we will try to do everything we can. And I know that my colleagues in Vienna are very skillful on this. By the way, we will have the head of our diplomatic representation in Vienna, Mr. Ulyanov, here with us, I think, starting from tomorrow. He will be here until Saturday, so I might ask if he wants to give special maybe interview or comment on what's happening, because it's, of course, he's much better placed to comment about the details on what's happening or what has happened than I am. So if you are interested, please contact Theodore, and we will try to arrange a special meeting with him, of course, provided he is interested and he has free time, okay?
Michel, then Sylvian. Michel?
I saw Elan as well,
Hi,
so
thank
don't
you.
ignore her.
Thank you so much for the briefing. I just wanted to follow up. Earlier this year, Russia had placed a hold on several panels of experts in the Security Council. Have you lifted any of those holds? Where do they stand? And if you haven't, why not? Thank you.
Well, this is the information that I really can't disclose, because everything that's about panel of experts is very sensitive, and we do not make this information public. I can tell you that we are engaged with the UN, with our partners, to find a solution to this. You know, the reasons for this move by Russia was that we really were very much worried about the fact that the panels of experts were not unbiased and impartial as they are supposed to be. And we tried to correct this. We have every right to do so, and we are very much looking forward to a new composition of the panel, which would be really reflecting the requirements that I quoted.
Be quick, please. Sylvian Zeil, please. You have you can ask your question.
Thank you, Ambassador, for giving this press briefing. I'm Sylviane Zahir from L'Orient Le Jour. My question is, how much Russia is helping in the peace process with the extension of Abraham Accord of Syria and Lebanon?
Extension of Abraham Accords on Syria and Lebanon? I haven't heard about it, frankly. Haven't heard about...
There are discussions.
In Russia, Abraham Accords is not about Russia. It's about Abraham first and foremost, and about the United States. So why should we?
With United States, and are you willing? Are you helping Syria and Lebanon in this process, behind the scene?
I think you should ask really this question to our American colleagues. They are masterminds of Abraham Accords. We have nothing to do with it. We know that some countries have normalized or about to normalize their ties with Israel. We do not oppose this trend. We just say that the best way to do it would be to not to forget about Palestinian cause, Palestinian problem, and we all witnessed to what it might lead in May of this year when there was a flare-up of tensions in Middle East. That's it, but I frankly haven't heard about anything that is linked with Abraham Accords, Lebanon, Syria, or whoever. And I am really the worst person placed to comment these issues.
Thank you. I have another question. Is Russia interested in the rebuilding Beirut fort?
Of course we are interested, and I think we are assisting. We are assisting. I know that we provided some satellite data to our Lebanese friends. Everybody is very much worried about this country, and everybody is willing to help. Through UN or bilaterally, and I'm absolutely sure that we're trying to do our best. We have traditionally very good relations with Lebanon, and it's a tradition, and we want to keep this tradition. So we are very much sympathetic and supportive of this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Alan, then Bitul, if we have time.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. The U.S. is forcing 27 Russian diplomats to leave the country by the end of January. Is there a threat that the similar step might affect the diplomats in Russian mission to the UN? And what is the possible exit of this deadlock in this situation? Thank you.
Well, I think you refer to the interview of my colleague, Ambassador Antonov. I think it was very extensive and detailed, so he really explained our reasoning, our preoccupations in this regard. He explained how this scheme works and why we really regard this move as an expulsion of diplomats. So I will not go into the detail here. As for the threat, well, every Russian diplomat who is working in the United States faces certain threat, and it's unpredictable because, well, there were situations when a lot of my colleagues were asked to leave. Well, nobody is safe, including myself, because you never know what will come to the mind of our American friends. And it's, of course, this situation is not normal. We have cited many times that it has to be changed. We have to remove all these obstacles. We have to come back to the normal functioning of our diplomatic missions. It's a complex issue. It's not only about diplomats. As you know, we have diplomatic property which is still being alienated from us. We don't have access to it. It's not only in New York for Russian mission, but also for the embassy and for some other objects, totally 6 if I'm not mistaken. So, of course, this is a complex issue, and it should be sorted out before we can speak about some kind of renaissance of relations between Russia and the US. This is absolutely clear, and I think the two presidents also couldn't avoid this issue when they were meeting in Geneva. So, well, the situation is very worrying, and I'm very sympathetic with my colleagues in Washington. They face more difficulties than we do. With us, still the status as a mission to the United Nations helps us a lot, but, well, there are certain measures that affect us as well. and we enumerated the problems that we face. We still face very problematic and nervous situations when we want to bring somebody here to the United Nations, which should be done automatically as part of US obligations as host country. So there are a lot of issues, but it's a topic for maybe another press conference. And we still have only a couple of minutes, and I have to rush to the Security Council meeting with your understanding.
One more question?
One more question.
Bitul, please.
Thanks, Theodore. Thank you, Ambassador. I'll have a follow-up on Afghanistan. The Taliban have made some promises to the international community, but what we're seeing on the ground does not really reflect any of the commitments they made. Does Russia think that the Taliban are keeping their promises? And do you think the Taliban should have a representative at the UN?
I think I already answered this question. As for the representative, it's not yet about recognition. It's about engagement with Taliban, and we are engaged. We have our embassy there working and functioning. So our ambassador has to contact Taliban authorities, but that doesn't mean recognition. You're absolutely right that there is information that there are a lot of moves from Taliban which wouldn't be very much welcome by international community. There are certain expectations that we have. But the information is very conflicting. I know that it is very diverse throughout Afghanistan. In certain regions, for example, there are girls' schools reopening. In certain regions, they are closed. We don't have information again from some places, and it's very difficult to really have a clear picture on what's happening. We think that we should engage with Taliban. We think that the situation in Afghanistan is very important for the whole world, for us especially, because it borders Central Asia, and this is a very important region for us. So we are interested in stability, in prosperity of this country. We are ready to help. We also have certain expectations towards Talibs, and we made these expectations quite clear. There are no doubts about this. So we are waiting, and we hope that they will be able to impress international community in the way that we will start certain moves towards their better representation or their recognition. But again, we are re-engaged with them, and that's where we are at now. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good day.